China has invaded Nepal. The Nepali government denies it. How deep does Chinese influence in Nepal go? Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. So, I think it's safe to say India and China aren't getting along right now, what with that recent deadly border clash and all. This is the disputed border, called the Line of Actual Control. There's a lot of disputed area between the two countries. China has been gradually setting up shop in the region, building military bases, and pushing India back. And since this has worked out so well for China, they've also started doing the same thing in Nepal.
China is expanding its boundaries into northern territories of Nepal. Several patches of Nepalese territory in many districts have already been encroached upon by China. And what's even more worrying is that China may develop its border observation post of armed police in those territories.
That was based on a leaked survey by the Nepali government. China has entered these 7 border districts. However, the Nepali government has officially denied that report. The newspaper that published the story later apologized. Strange. Oh, did I mention that the Nepali government is run by the Nepal Communist Party? Yeah. Nepal is now a democracy with 3 main political parties. But there was a long civil war with Maoist rebels that ended in 2006. Nepal ended up with 2 communist parties, the Marxist-Leninists and the Maoists. Which one to vote for? Tough choice. But don't worry, because they teamed up to win the election in 2017. And it worked so well that they've combined forces permanently to become the Nepal Communist Party. Which is actually kind of impressive, because communists are usually terrible at working together. What's that, Shelley? The Nepal Communist Party is inching towards a split. Okay, that was predictable. Anyway, since 2018, the Nepal Communist Party has been dominant at the federal and state levels. And the Nepal Communist Party is interested in closer ties with China, which explains why they're not really complaining about Chinese encroachment on the Nepal border.
There were protests against China in Nepal after this survey report was leaked, but Nepal's Communist Party did not escalate the border dispute with China. The reason? Beijing has been pouring billions of investments into the country, from Belt and Road initiatives to other investments.
Well, now things are starting to make a little more sense. Nepal is stuck between a rock and a hard place. And by that, I mean it's stuck between India and China, a small country bordered by 2 massive countries. In fact, Nepal also has a border dispute with India, and the Nepal Communist Party is more willing to argue over the border with India than the border with China. This is the Kalapani territory. It borders India, China, and Nepal. Both Nepal and India claim it, but after the latest border clash between India and China, India stationed troops there. What did Nepal do? They unveiled their own new map in late May, which included the Kalapani region as part of Nepal. That'll show those Indian troops. As you can probably guess, being a much smaller country sandwiched between 2 much larger competing powers is not easy. And Nepal has been trying to make use of the long-standing conflict between India and China to leverage its own relationships with both countries. India is Nepal's largest trading partner, accounting for 65% of its imports and 57% of its exports in 2017. However, in the current fiscal year, over 90% of foreign direct investment in Nepal is from China. Beijing pledged nearly $500 million in financial aid to Nepal in October last year when Chinese leader Xi Jinping visited the Himalayan country. In 2017, Nepal joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. That's meant a lot more money for infrastructure like hydropower projects, as well as things like roads to Tibet. Yes, Nepal borders the Tibet part of China. So China and Nepal agreed to build a rail link through Tibet. That's important to Nepal. You see, Nepal is landlocked, and it has relied on travel through India to get access to the sea. But that isn't always reliable. like in 2015, when a group of Nepali locals blockaded the main trade corridor with India for 2 months. The Nepali government claimed that they were backed by India, which India denied. But that's about the time when China was starting up the Belt and Road Initiative, and their proposed rail link through Tibet would give Nepal access to 4 seaports and 3 land ports in China. While India's Calcutta port is closest to Nepal by distance, Chinese rail service to Tibet, which borders Nepal, provides it with maritime access that may be shorter in time and more competitive in cost than Calcutta. But remember, the Chinese Communist Party isn't helping Nepal out of the kindness of its heart. It has other plans. First, Nepal, along with several other countries, are being used by China to box in India. And then, of course, there's the debt trap diplomacy of the Belt and Road Initiative. The rail line that links Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, with China, well, it's costing Nepal $2.5 billion. Should the project move forward on a loan basis, Kathmandu may struggle to generate the revenue-generating capacity to repay it, and the country could end up trading Indian dominance for Chinese. But there are much more immediate things the Chinese regime wants in Nepal. For example, China wanted and got Nepal's support for the draconian national security law in Hong Kong. After a recent video conference between China and Nepal, as well as Afghanistan and Pakistan, they all reached a 5-point important consensus. The first point was that everyone needs to work together to fight the coronavirus, and no one should politicize or point fingers at who's to blame for it. It's also important to promote the joint construction of the Belt and Road Initiative. But the most important point was that everyone agreed to support China in the United Nations. Nepal has also most recently backed out of a $500 million grant from the U.S. after the Nepal Communist Party turned against it. Why? Because the U.S. was trying to foist its hidden geopolitical agenda on Nepal through the grant in an apparent bid to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. Sure, everyone's worried about America's hidden geopolitical agenda, but they just let the Belt and Road Initiative waltz right in. No hidden geopolitical agenda there. But no discussion of China's influence in Nepal would be complete without talking about Tibet. Remember, Nepal borders Tibet, which is currently part of China. And a lot of Tibetan refugees have crossed the Nepal border to escape China. But China has always pushed Nepal to increase monitoring on its border. According to a confidential document published by WikiLeaks in 2010, Beijing demanded that Kathmandu strengthen border troops. The document also stated that China would reward Nepali forces if they handed over Tibetans fleeing across the border. This isn't new. Nepal decided to stop issuing refugee certificates to Tibetans in the mid-1990s. In 2002, Nepal canceled 3 different events in Kathmandu marking the Dalai Lama's birth celebrations. But if I were Nepal, I'd watch out. Considering the Chinese Communist Party's MO about borders, it might not be too long before all of Nepal turns out to have been Chinese territory since ancient times. And now is the time when I answer a question from one of you, a fan who supports China Uncensored on the crowdfunding website Patreon. Kenneth Cripps asks, I really think Trump will formally recognize Taiwan. At this point, what can the Chinese do about it except piss and moan? Well, that is the question, isn't it? If you don't know the history, after Maoist rebels took over mainland China, the U.S. cut off relations, moving its embassy to Taipei, the capital of Taiwan, aka the Republic of China. But in 1979, the U.S. recognized the People's Republic of China as a way to counter the Soviet Union, and the U.S. moved its embassy to Beijing. Ever since, the U.S. has not treated Taiwan as a country diplomatically, even though it's still a country. But the Trump administration has been recognizing Taiwan more bit by bit, like by selling Taiwan weapons and sending a high-level cabinet member to visit. But would the Trump administration actually go so far as to formally recognize Taiwan as a country and establish formal diplomatic relations? The Chinese Communist Party would freak out, especially because it might encourage a lot of other countries to do the same. But what would China actually do? It will be a defining moment. They can't do nothing because then the world will realize that the Chinese Communist Party and all its blustering was nothing more than a paper tiger. But will they actually go to war over it? I think it's unlikely, but not impossible. Thanks for your question, Kenneth. And thank you for watching. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe. Even if you already are a subscriber, double check, because YouTube has secretly unsubscribed people before. And if you like uncensored news about China, please support the show on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/China Uncensored to see how. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.